Welcome back to the Badass Literature Society, where badasses come together to rate and review novels recommended by you. Hi, I'm Michael.
This is Barbara.
Today we're doing a bonus review of A Spindle Splintered by Alix E. Harrow. First, let's talk a little bit about the author. She is a former academic, adjunct, cashier, blueberry harvester, and Kentuckian. Alix E. Harrow is now a full-time writer living in Virginia with her husband and their semi-feral kids. Her words, not mine. She is the author of a Hugo Award-winning short fiction, and her debut novel, The 10,000 Doors of January, was a finalist for the Hugo, Nebula, Locus, World Fantasy, and Goodreads Choice Awards. Her second book, The Once and Future Witches, is out now, as is A Mirror Mended, the second book in this series, or second novella in this series. You want to tell us a little bit about the book itself, Barbara?
Yeah, so this was originally published on October 5th of 2021. It is fantasy and retelling for the genre, and like Michael said, it's a novella, so it's 128 pages, and currently has a 3.7 out of 5 on Goodreads, 4.4 on Barnes & Noble, 4.2 on Amazon, and a 4.3 on Audible, and it has been nominated for the Hugo Awards for Best Novella in 2022, and a Goodreads Choice Award for Fantasy in 2021. And as of this recording, it has not won any awards. We think it's important for readers to know what, if any, representation is in the books we read. So for this book, there are no POC characters, main and minor LGBTQ plus characters, and a main character with a disability.
All right. Now do you want to give us a little mini summary, spoiler-free, of the book?
Yes, so this book is follows Zinnia Gray, and it is her 21st birthday, and her friend Charm wants to make it extra special because, and this isn't a spoiler, it's literally on the back of the cover, she is pretty much dying, or like she has this fatal disease that most people don't live past their 21st birthday, and so she's not really expecting to live past this birthday. But then something happens and she gets like transported to this like magical world of Sleeping Beauty and gets to experience Sleeping Beauty in her own way, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good summary. So, what did you think about A Spindle Splintered? And remember, no spoilers.
So I really enjoyed the book. I liked the retelling of Sleeping Beauty and how the author incorporated all the parts of Sleeping Beauty. And honestly, I think it made it better. I know some people enjoy Sleeping Beauty. I think it's fine. It's not my favorite story because even though it's called Sleeping Beauty, she's really not in it that much. So I thought this was a really cool take on it. I thought all the new way that she incorporated it was really interesting. I liked how quick it was because it was extremely, and I mean like not quick to read, but like it was fast paced because it was so short that it kind of was like bam, bam, bam. And honestly, I would have preferred if this was longer because I would have really enjoyed like a full length book out of this.
That's fair.
Story, but yeah. I know there's obviously a second one, but it's just that short. So, but still, I really, really enjoyed it overall.
So I also enjoyed it a lot. I'm not a big Sleeping Beauty fan as far as the fairy tale goes, like Barbara. And so I also thought this did a better job with that story. Another thing I wanted to talk about is I think with novellas or short stories, for me, I always feel like it's either too fast and I want more, or there's not enough content because it's so short and it's not as enjoyable. Whereas I thought this was kind of a sweet spot for all of that. Like, sure, it would have been nice to have a little more story, but I think that for the story it told, it did a really good job telling it in that small amount of time. And it also helped, I think, that the book was pretty much nonstop. Like it was hard to put down. Like I think Barbara actually read the book in one sitting, and it's one of those things that it's very much a page turner. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. So like always, we're not going to go into our individual ratings for now. Got to wait for that. But our group score for this one was a 7.75 out of 10. So following up with that, would you recommend this book? For me, yeah, I would. I think that most books we read, like there's some, segment of our audience or of like the greater audience that I wouldn't recommend a book to. And I don't think that there's really anybody I wouldn't recommend this book to. I think that even if you're someone who's just like, fairy tales, I hate, like it's only 128 pages. Like it's not like I'm asking you to read a 600 page book. And for me, I before I read books for this podcast, would have said I was not a fan of fairy tale retellings because I didn't think they were necessary. But I really enjoyed reading Cinder and that series, and I've really enjoyed this. And I think that there's really nobody I wouldn't recommend this to. I think it can appeal to everybody for all sorts of different reasons.
I mean, yeah, I would recommend it to most people, but I don't know if everyone would enjoy it. Some people just really don't like fairy tale retellings, or some people just don't even like fairy tales. So I wouldn't be like, "Oh my god, I know you absolutely hate fairy tales, but you have to read this book." Like, no, I'm not going to do that. But for people who enjoy retellings, since that's a whole thing now, and for people who like fairy tales, I think this is a great book to pick up. Even people who like fantasy novels, I like the world that she created. She created it.
And I guess that's fair. I guess I wouldn't recommend it to someone who absolutely hates fairy tales. I was more leaning into someone like I used to be who didn't like fairy tale retellings, who has since changed their mind after reading books that I probably wouldn't have picked up had somebody not recommended them to us. Anywho, for those of you leaving us, don't forget to give us a rating if you like us, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. In both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod. We'd love to hear from you. If you've got a book you want us to read on the show, let us know. Now, remember, the second part of this episode is going to be an in-depth look at this book. So if you do want to read it, stop listening now, take a couple hours to read the 128 pages, and then come back and listen to the rest.
Hi, this is Leah Stuhler, creator and host of YA Book Chat podcast. If you love reading young adult books and chatting about them with your friends, then head on over to my podcast and take a listen. Each episode, my guest and I chat about a different YA book. We start spoiler-free and then head into our spoiler section where we dive into the mysteries of each book. And we do it with laughs and fun along the way. You can listen to YA Book Chat on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and wherever you get your podcast. And now, back to the show.
Now, for those of you sticking around for the spoilers, here we go. So we'll start off how we always do and talk about who gets the Badass Character Award. Who is your nominee this time?
It's just kind of hard for me to pick because, like, realistically speaking, there's only two main characters. We have Zinnia and Primrose, and between those two, I feel like they're both badasses in their own right. And I think I'm leaning a little more towards Zinnia, just of what she kind of had to go through, and we get more of her perspective. So I would say Zinnia. Am I saying that right? Is it Zinnia?
Yeah, that's right. So, like Barbara, there aren't a lot of characters in this book, and I think I was more torn between Zinnia and Primrose. I think that they're both badass in their own way, and I actually was leaning more towards Primrose because I think that Zinnia is badass for lots of reasons. Primrose I thought was especially badass just because she's a princess living in medieval times, who's effectively like not ashamed of her feminist ideas, which would have been, super bad at that point in history for whatever reason.
So for the record, this is a fantasy world, so there's no such thing as medieval times for this.
So generally, books that take place in medieval-esque times tend to stick to the trope that women are second-class citizens.
I'm just saying it's a fancy world, but Anyway,
I thought that was cool. That's why I was going to give it to Primrose. So I guess since Lauren isn't here to be our tiebreaker,
it's a lock. They both get it.
They both get the award. That works for me. So let's talk a little bit about the handful of characters that are in the book. Let's first talk about Zinnia. Barbara, you want to give a little summary of her?
Sure. Zinnia is our main girl. We follow her throughout the whole book. It is a first-person perspective of hers. She is 21. She graduated college super quickly because, she doesn't have much time to live. She has this Zinnia has a terminal disease, and that she is technically supposed to die at 21 or not live past the age of 21. No one has lived past the age of 21 with this disease that she has. And so she kind of lives her life in that way where she doesn't want to get close to anyone. She doesn't do all that kind of stuff because she pretty much has... it's one of those things where people always ask, like, oh, would you like to know when you were dying? I feel like in her case, probably not, because she kind of lives her life that way. So anyways, she falls in love with Sleeping Beauty, not only because she is pretty, but because she kind of feels like it's her. Like, she has... I don't know, she just connects with her in this weird kind of way. She is very sarcastic. I like her dry humor. That's the kind of humor that I also have, and that's why I really gravitated towards her, because of her really witty, dry sense of humor, self-deprecating as well, kind of dark humor, because, you know, she's a dying girl and, you know, people always make awkward comments, and she kind of makes a funny joke back, which is kind of, you know, self-deprecating and dark at the same time. Like, well, I don't really know what I'll be doing after this because I'm going to be dead. That type of thing. And that is our main girl, Zinnia.
Yeah, very much your sense of humor. I agree. You and Zinnia would probably be friends.
Oh, for sure. I think I would be friends with all the people here.
So let's see. Next character is Primrose. Primrose is the princess of the world that Zinnia gets yanked into in the book. Primrose is effectively the real life Sleeping Beauty. She's
one of her iterations.
One of her, yes. We find out one of her iterations later in the book. There's always other. This is a multiverse of Sleeping Beauty characters. But she's the only one we're aware of for, I'd say, like 90+% of the book is Primrose, and Primrose is your typical Aurora character. Like, she is had the whole curse from the witch. She is supposed to prick her finger on the spindle. Her parents are trying to shelter her and keep her from that. They burned all the spindles in the town and destroyed them, and the whole typical story.
She's gorgeous.
She was, yeah. That's a little bit about Primrose. You want to tell us about Charmaine?
So Charm is Zinnia's best friend and only friend, really. She is fiercely protective of her, super, super, super smart, in the sense that she's literally studying a lot of science that I don't understand, like physics and that kind of crap, in hopes to save Zinnia. She has like her pick of all these colleges, and she kind of was leaning towards one to hopefully find a cure for Zinnia. I think she is the hope that Zinnia kind of doesn't want to have, because Charm is hoping that they can find a cure for her, or hoping that she can live past the age of 21. And they're BFFs, essentially. And she is also hilarious. I would love to be friends with them.
I can see that. I can see that for sure. And our final character we'll talk about here is Zelendine. I think I pronounced that correctly. She is the wicked witch who has cursed Primrose, that we learn relatively quickly is not so wicked and was actually a Sleeping Beauty tale herself.
She's Maleficent's character, but turns out she's not really Maleficent.
Not really Maleficent. She's actually another universe's Sleeping Beauty, or
she's
another
the OG,
iteration.
actually.
The OG Sleeping Beauty.
She's the OG Sleeping Beauty.
And I'm not going to go into that a whole lot because we've got a specific question that talks about that a little bit later. But that's who she is. For the bulk of the book, she's kind of you think she's the antagonist because she's the one that they're trying to find and figure out how to remove or lift this curse that she's put on Primrose. And the book has lots of great twists from there, but that's who she is. She is the Maleficent character. Thank you. I couldn't think of that character's name from the.
I know you said the Wicked Witch, and I was like, that.
I know.
Is
and I was like, that's Wizard of Oz. That's not right, but I couldn't think of.
Gosh,
Maleficent.
No wonder you hate fairy tales. You don't know anything about them. For shame. For shame.
So moving on from there, let's go over some of our discussion questions. The first one is A Spindle Splintered begins with the declaration that Sleeping Beauty is the worst fairy tale. Aimless and amoral and chauvinist as shit. It's the fairy tale that feminist scholars cite when they want to talk about women's passivity in historical narratives. Do you agree or disagree with this assertion?
I mean, yes. So if we're talking about the Disney version of Sleeping Beauty, I always found it ironic that it was even called Sleeping Beauty, because if I'm not mistaken, she has like maybe 7 minutes of actual time and like speaking time, you know?
Well, not even 7 minutes of speaking time, probably.
Well, okay. Anyways, she has like 7 minutes of actual speaking time, and we're not even counting her little song that she gets, right? And that's it. That is all she's in. She's a very passive character in her old damn story. Like, she ain't no main character, okay? She is sub-character. Prince Philippe, the heroic, I love you, Prince, that she, like, madly falls in love with after, like, one meeting with him, also absurd, gets more screen time than she does. And I've never been a fan of it just because I think that's silly, because it's whatever. I do enjoy the fairies in it. I love me some Merryweather. Whoop whoop. And if you don't know who that is, she is the blue fairy. And I thought their little kind of like sidebar story was hilarious. But outside of that, like, she's not someone I wanted to look up to. She just kind of lays there, you know. She doesn't do anything for herself. She literally just, a prince literally saves her. She doesn't do crap.
Yeah.
So it's just meh. Now, the Disney Maleficent movie, like, love that because they kind of made it. There's no kind of. They made it better, and I think that's why I enjoyed the retelling of this, because she flipped it on its head to where Sleeping Beauties, take their story into their hands, and they're not a passive character in it. So 100%, I do agree with that. It's not great by any stretch of the imagination. And there's the whole kissing without consent. It's a whole thing. Like, the whole freaking movie is not the best.
It's problematic to the nines. I agree. I agree with that assertion as well. I think that's all true. Of all the Disney movies and Disney princess movies, Sleeping Beauty's definitely always been my least favorite. I think I maybe have seen it one time. Like, I think I watched it and I was like, you know what, I don't really need to see this again. Whereas most Disney movies I've seen, like, you know, multiple times. That one didn't get a little playtime. After your comment, though, I looked it up because I knew somebody had probably counted. Aurora in the movie, Barbara, has 18 lines.
Yeah.
Total in the whole film.
Anyway.
So yes. Anyway, definitely agree with that statement. That I believe it was Zinnia who was having that thought in the book, that quote. But so in the book, which plot twist took you the most by surprise? And for me, it was that when they turned it into a multiverse, and we had the thing at the end where, when they're trying to save Primrose, like, she ends up like summoning all these different other, you know, Sleeping Beauty princesses from their version of the story, like from like the Nordic version of the story. I can't remember that character's name, but they were all these
Brunhilde. I think that's her fake. That's her name that she gave her. I don't actually know if that's her actual name.
Maybe
the Viking princess.
That was the part that surprised me the most, was when she summons in all these other princesses, and she talks that there's like effectively a multiverse of all these different very similar stories, and they were all going to work together to try to break the cycle, and at least for Primrose. And that was definitely the plot twist that took me by surprise the most.
Yeah, I didn't think the Maleficent character turned into like actually one of the Sleeping Beauties. Like, I kind of figured that was going to happen because they got to that part really quick, and I was still like half the novella left, and I was like, okay, what the hell else is going to happen? Like, there's no way they're just going to... I was expecting some type of twist there, thinking maybe she was something. I wasn't expecting maybe her being the OG Sleeping Beauty, as it were. But yeah, I would say there being multiple Sleeping Beauty-esque characters, and how they're all different, but yet they all have the same curse. And it's not like the same curse of... I mean, it is kind of like either pricking their finger and falling asleep or dying or all that kind of stuff. And it's because... I think the twist that I liked was it was because of the OG character who was trying to save them all, decided that would be better than miserably living their life, or in one of the characters' cases, maybe committing suicide or having other awful things happen to them. So I thought that was a pretty interesting twist to it, was that she was the one who kind of orchestrated all this, trying to help them.
Yeah, no, I agree. That would have been my number two. For me, it also would have been the witch being one of the Sleeping Beauty stories, which I'm not surprised that you kind of thought that was coming. I definitely did not. Let's see. So Zinnia Gray, our main character, has quote unquote rules for dying girls like herself and Sleeping Beauty, and says, if you like something, like it hard, because you don't have a lot of time to waste. What intention do you think the author had by creating Zinnia's rules, and how do you think these rules help Zinnia navigate the world?
So I think the intention was just, as someone who knows your end at a point blank time, relatively, kind of. I mean, I guess she could have died beforehand, but, you know, the doctors were all up in her, so she kind of had a reasonable idea of when she was going to die. I feel like she created these rules to help her navigate the world as she saw it, because that is not a normal way of living. That is not, you know, most people don't know when their time of death is going to happen, so they might not live a certain way. And I feel like she had these rules so she could protect herself from getting even more disappointed with what was happening to her.
Yeah, I think that's true. And you know, the question has like, what intention? And I think that that the rule, like Zinnia created the rules for herself because of like, she wanted to make sure she was being intentional in everything that she did, because like you said, she's got only so much time and she doesn't want to waste any of that time. And so I think that I thought that was cool. I thought that the rules for dying girls that the author included were definitely a very interesting aspect. Okay, Princess Primrose seems to conform to Zinnia's preconception of Sleeping Beauty, but as they embark on their journey, Zinnia notes that, I suppose I should stop being surprised when the princess is more than a doe-eyed maiden. What are the most memorable surprises during their journey, and in what ways does Primrose defy the stereotypical fairy tale princess? So I talked about this a little bit earlier in that the Badass Award part, that Primrose is kind of a not your stereotypical doe-eyed maiden. Come help me, I need help from the prince. Like she's intelligent, she's smart, she doesn't want to be tied down to a man. She doesn't want to live this life that, based on the tradition in her kingdom, she's supposed to live. She has these feminist ideas, and she has these she's an independent woman and doesn't want to be part of this whole system that she's been born into.
She doesn't want to be tied down to a man because she don't like men.
Well, and that was going to be the thing I said was the most memorable surprise during the tale. So throughout this time, one of the things that was kind of like the audience is just to suspend belief, because Zinnia was somehow texting her friend Charm the whole time that she's in this fairy tale world that definitely doesn't have any kind of technology like that, but she has cell service still. So she's texting her and she sends her some pictures of Primrose, and Charm's like, oh, damn, she's pretty good looking. And then when Charm gets brought into the world, it was a nice surprise to see that Primrose felt the same way, and they kind of had a little budding relationship there as part of the story that I liked.
Love at first sight.
That was my favorite memorable surprise during Zinnia and Primrose's journey.
She is nothing like Sleeping Beauty. She literally, she didn't want to get married to a man because she didn't love him. She didn't want to get married. Like, she didn't want to do her duty of, okay, I have to, get married to this dude because it'll, better put my family in better prospects of blah, blah, ruling the kingdom. She didn't want that. She didn't want to do that at all. She wanted to marry for love. So that was her one thing. And then when Zinnia comes around, Zinnia asks her, like, oh, are you just going to take this lying down? Are you going to do something about it? And Aurora literally would have just conked out because, that is what she does in the movie. But this one, Primrose is like, no, like, I'm going to do something about it. And she, like, has a sword. That's the best part. Like, she has a sword, and she brings the sword with her when they're going to confront who they thought was this Maleficent-like character in their story. And she even pulls out the sword and was like, I'm going to stab you and all this stuff. And she was like gung-ho for it. And then, of course, Zinnia was like, throws it down. It's like, no, help, please. Like, you're a witch, so you can uncurse us or whatever. And so, everything that she does is pretty much contradictory to what the stereotypical Sleeping Beauty did in her movie. Mm-hmm. And she is... You can tell, like, she just fiercely loves love, and that's what she wants. And unfortunately, she's at a time where she can't love who she wants to love. I thought there was a budding flirtatious between Zinnia and Primrose, and then when Charm gets in, it was like love at first sight, because I thought it was funny because Charm was like she was Primrose was running, and Charm and she trips, as every good princess does in a good princess movie, and Charm was there to like pick her up, and that's where they're like lovey-dovey eyed at each other, and I was like, hee.
All right, so let's talk about the Maleficent-like character now. So upon discovering that the wicked fairy's name, Zinnia tells Primrose that Zellandine was one of us, but that her story was far worse than ours. So when she learns the name, she immediately recognizes it because it's from her. She had her degree in fairy tale literature or something like that. Yeah, but anyways, Zellandine's story was considered a quote unquote courtly romance when it was published. In discovering the ugliness of the very first Sleeping Beauty, Zinnia reveals that the story is relevant today. She says, I used to see Sleeping Beauty as my wildest, most aspirational fantasy. A dying girl who didn't die, a tragedy turned into a romance. But suddenly I saw her as my mere reflection. A girl with a shitty story. A girl whose choices were stolen from her. In what other ways is the story still relevant or outdated? And how does A Spindle Splintered update the story? And how were other versions of Sleeping Beauty altered to fit their time and or audience? Sorry.
There's a lot going on here in this
There is.
question.
It's a big
There's a
question.
lot going on. Okay, so let me let's kind of break this down and get 3 parts. Jesus.
Answer the essay question, Barbara. Come on.
I hate these types of questions. Okay, so how is Zeladin's story relevant today? Well, I don't think it's relevant in the sense that we need to look at this and learn from it. Because there's nothing good to take from this story. It is not a courtly romance. I'm sorry. And I don't want to get too detailed in this story, but it's just not. Pretty much she gets taken advantage of by the prince, essentially. So how is it outdated? It's super outdated. It's removes her choices as far as that. She gets sexually assaulted. She has to decide about keeping her rapist's child or not. And in this story, she does not keep it. Whereas in the original, I believe that she actually did and raised her, the daughter too.
Correct.
Broke the cycle or whatever. So a lot of this is not, and it's crazy to me this was considered romantic. What? So many things wrong with that. But regardless, it's oh yeah, he magically broke her curse. No, the curse is, the dude, not falling asleep randomly. But anyways, so moving on to the second question. How does A Spindle Splinter update the story? Well, it updates the story. I kind of mentioned that already. She makes a choice for herself, I think, for the first time in her life and decides not to keep the baby. Mm-hmm. And she also tries to help other women in her predicament. Last question. How were other versions of Sleeping Beauty altered to fit their time in or audience? So I'm not too familiar with other Sleeping Beauty. I know there is the Disney one, the original one. I'm trying to think of. There's another.
Those are the only two I'm familiar with. There's
another one that I know of because Primrose stems from that name. Primrose is another name for Aurora that they had because technically, if I'm not mistaken, even the Disney one, her actual name's never even uttered. I don't believe in the story. Or maybe they actually do say it, but I know there's a few other ones where she doesn't actually have a name, so they call her Primrose and stuff. So I'm not too familiar with it, but
there are 10 different versions that are considered
Sleeping Beauty.
The main, yeah.
Okay. I mean, Disney kind of, try to turn it into this beautiful, romantic story. But even as a kid, I didn't fall for that crap. I was like, how is this romantic? She doesn't, first off, she barely knows the dude. And then I'm supposed to believe that she fell in love with him, as soon as she saw him and sang a little lovey-dovey song. And then that's true love's kiss is supposed to wake her ass up. And she just barely met this dude. Okay. But I don't know. That's a weird question. It's time. Audience, it's what people enjoyed. They thought it was great that true love's kiss would break the curse, and really I feel like that would be the complete opposite.
You're not incorrect. All right, so now I got to answer this massive question. I think that the original story, which the one that she's referring to that Zelandine is a part of, is actually the second telling of Sleeping Beauty. And I think that it's only still relevant as a...
You only know this because you just Googled
it. I know,
and
I said that. I said I looked it up a minute ago.
Okay.
It's a second retelling, and I do only know that because I was just Googling it. And I think it's only relevant in that context. If someone is studying the evolution of a story that, started out being told in 1200 and is now still being told and retold in 2022... in that way, it's relevant to look back on the history in the same way studying any other history is relevant. For all other aspects, it's outdated, like Barbara said. We've already talked about how this updates the story, so I'm not going to go into that into huge detail. But it updates the story in the sense that we learn some different things about Zelandine. Like Barbara mentioned that we learned that she didn't keep the baby, whereas in the original story, she did keep the baby and some other stuff like that. The other versions were, I think the last question's kind of... what's the word I'm looking for?
I was going to say it's a product of their time. That's what these stories are.
It's a rhetorical question because every version of Sleeping Beauty was altered to fit the time and the audience, whether it's the OG one with Brumhilda, which actually was the name of the very first Sleeping Beauty, or whether it's this one that just came out last year. I think that every version of every fairy tale or folk tale or whatever it might be that gets retold and changed a little bit is altered to fit that time and audience. And so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on that, but I think that there are so many versions because it is a beloved story for whatever reason, and it keeps getting retold in slightly different versions in different cultures. What is the biggest question? So once you figured out that this is going to be a series, what's the biggest question that you want answered in the next book, A Mirror Mended? For me, the biggest question is that I want to know, I guess I want to know what happens to Zinnia, because in this book, she doesn't get cured in the sense that like she doesn't leave the world and come back to hers and all of a sudden she's healed and it's fine and oh my gosh, everything's great. But it's like somewhere in between because she still has the disease, she's still dying, but it's like whatever happened in that magical world rolled back the clock on her health. And so it's not as serious as it was and she has more time. And so I guess I'm most curious to see how her story progresses as far as that what's going on there and her character development and what changes. Maybe her like rules for dying girls will be altered because she has more time now. I'm also excited to see it's this Snow White story, I think, that's adapted in the next book, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that as well. But yeah, those are the two big things I'm excited to see answered and talked about in the next book.
I'm curious, kind of in the same vein, but I'm more curious to see how Zinnia lives this 21 more years of her life, because I feel like the first 21 years she was always just looking at the clock and thinking, when is it going to happen? And same with her parents. Like her parents really kind of wanted to keep her in this little bubble and didn't really let her experience anything. And now she is going to, because I believe she's going to seek out other Sleeping Beauties and save them, or if they want to be saved, obviously. So I'm curious to know how she's going to use her new time, her fresh time, to actually live instead of just waiting to die, waiting to die. Yeah, I'm curious to see what her disease does bring. Like Michael said, obviously there's no curing a disease. You can only cure ham. So I'm curious to know how that's going to work. If it's every time she pops into a new fantasy world, will the clock be reset? Because technically that's how they explained it. Because in the world that she landed in, this disease wasn't in this world, so therefore she didn't have it. But as soon as she stepped back into her real world, or her world, the disease is coming back because it is in this world. So I'm wondering how that's going to play, or her disease is going to play a role in the second book. I'm also curious to know if she's going to allow herself to, fall in love or experience what most people try to experience while living. And I want to see what happens with Primrose and Charm, because I also enjoyed their characters. And I heart them, all of them. And hopefully Zinnia still has her nice humor, because I thoroughly enjoyed that.
Don't worry, I'm sure it won't be too long before we read and talk about the next book, because it's another novella and we'll make a good bonus episode review. So last question. Zinnia Gray has a degree in folklore. Folklore, that's what she has a degree in, not fairy tales. Close enough.
It's not fairy tales and folklore.
It's
no.
not at all.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, she's got a degree in folklore, so she's uniquely qualified for this journey she takes. She identifies as Sleeping Beauty because of her illness and claims that even among the other nerds who majored in folklore, Sleeping Beauty is nobody's favorite. Romantic girls like Beauty and the Beast, vanilla girls like Cinderella, goth girls like Snow White, only dying girls like Sleeping Beauty. What is your favorite fairy tale, Barbara? And if you could enter another fairy tale, which would you choose and why? And what qualifications would you need to step into that role?
Okay, so I feel like this is hard to answer because there's phases. I feel like as a little child, you go through these phases of what's your favorite. So I really loved Beauty and the Beast. I wouldn't say I was a romantic kid. Maybe I was a little romantic. Honestly, no, you know what? It wasn't. It had nothing to do with romance with Beauty and the Beast. I liked Beauty and the Beast because I saw myself in Belle, because first off, I didn't realize until much later in life that Belle is supposed to be French. I just saw that she was the first princess that I had seen that looked like me, in the sense that she was dark-haired and brown-eyed. She did not, in fact, have my skin tone, but you know what? It's just, you kind of have to get it where you can, okay? Beggars can't be choosers. I was just happy that she kind of looked like me. I was happy that she was more interested in books than she was in finding romance, and that's what really gravitated me towards her. Was she always had her nose stuck in a book, and that was me. All growing up, you would find me reading a book. I would much prefer doing that than socializing as a child, and some would even argue now. So that's why I enjoyed Beauty and the Beast. Also, my fantasy was maybe one day a beast man would come and give me the library of my dreams. And I think that's every bookworm's dream, is that. And I think that's where Belle fell in love with the beast, because let's be honest, that's every chick's favorite scene if you are a book nerd like me. So that's why I liked Beauty and the Beast when I was younger. And then Mulan came out. And oh my gosh, did I absolutely love Mulan. I felt in love with her character because she was this badass chick that was like, I'm going to protect my family. I'm going to protect my dad. It doesn't matter that she was scared to do this. It didn't matter that she sucked at it. She worked hard. And it was just one of this like F you to society that didn't allow her to do things that she wanted to do. And it was like, the first little feminist movie that I really enjoyed, if you want to call it that. And I loved it because she went against everything of her society saying that women were not good enough. And she showed them, because she literally saved all of China. And so it's hard. It's hard to pick because I have different stages in life where I enjoy different movies. But I had 2 copies of Mulan. That's how much I loved that movie. I think I like VHS wise, I'm totally aging myself here. VHS like just totally obliterated my first VHS tape, but luckily I had a second one copy to watch Mulan on.
So Mulan is your pick then?
It's both of those. I can't disregard
but
one.
You gotta pick. You gotta
no,
pick
I don't.
one.
I do not. This is not a life and death situation. I do not have to pick.
Well, then pick
those
one
two.
of them to
Those
talk about
two,
what qualifications that you would
about
need.
It.
What qualifications you need to step into those fairy tales.
What do you mean qualification? It says if you could enter any fairy tale, which one would I choose?
And why? And then the final sentence.
Well, it doesn't say which favorite fairy tale and why would you enter that fairy tale. I can pick whatever fairy tale I want. So now I'm trying to think of what fairy tale in general that has since come out that I would want to be a part of. That's hard to pick. And I'm sticking to just like... I don't... so are we sticking to just Disney fairy tales or like folklore in general?
Any fairy tales. I'm going to talk about a Grimm's brother one. So
I would say folklore in general. I think the Brazilian ones are really cool. Like I think it would be really cool to be in like the Amazon, because we have a lot of folklore. And folklore is different than fairy tale, right? I don't really... What is the difference actually?
They're similar, but not exactly the similar. So fairy tales were generally like the princess stories, like Sleeping Beauty and all those, and folklore can cover a lot more than that. Like the Frog Prince and Little Red Riding Hood.
The hell is that?
Folklore can cover a lot more. Like Beowulf is folklore.
Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't know which fairy tale I would choose because I want to be a part of all of them. I think if you haven't figured it out, I like reading to escape the real world. So if you could place me in any fairy tale, I'm down. Like I'll be in it. Sure. I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I would want to be in any of them. Like I think it would be cool to be what you guys consider a mermaid, but the Brazilian mermaid, which were like fierce, evil people who like killed men. Like you can't get wrong with that. That's awesome. Qualification would you need to step into that role? None. I literally, someone goes, hey, do you want to be a part of a fairy tale? And like, do you want to prick your finger and go to a fairy tale? I'd be like, yeah, sure. It can't be any worse than this. So like, yeah, I'm down. I guess the only one I would want to be part of, but even then I feel like we'll say the crappy Sleeping Beauty one, like I would be the break of chains, like Zinnia and Primrose, and be like, screw you medieval times when women were seen as other. I will show you So no qualifications needed. Just tell me where to
enough.
sign. I'm like that idiot Ariel. Is like, oh, I'm not going to read this. Signing my legs off for a man? Sure. Where's the dotted line?
Wow.
That's me with adventure, not a man, though. Okay, let's get one thing.
Fair enough.
Michael, how about you?
So I don't know. My favorite fairy tale is, I enjoyed all of them when I was a kid. I think I got a different appreciation for them and how I'd answer this next question when I read the actual, like the Grimm Brothers versions, because I don't think I want to be in any of those worlds. But
oh yeah, theirs are real dark. Like,
but I love them. I love the Grimm Brothers versions because like they're very interesting and they are very dark.
Before they were Disneyfied.
I think of those, I'm just gonna say my two favorite of those are Little Red Riding Hood and Hansel and Gretel. Both very, very good fairy tales.
They both die at the end.
It's true. Well, that's not true. Not in Little Red Riding Hood.
She gets eaten by the wolf.
She doesn't die. But if I could enter any fairy tale, what would I choose and why? I would choose Little Red Riding Hood, and I would enter Little Red Riding Hood as the huntsman, the one who kills the big bad wolf. And as far as what qualifications you'd need, I guess you'd have to be brave. And you have to know how to fire whatever kind of firearms they would have used at that time, which probably would have been school.
Is that what that means by qualifications?
Yes.
Oh, I thought it was like, what did I need to be able to go into this world as far as like what needed
makes
to
you
happen?
Qualified to do it? And
what makes me qualified? I'm not qualified to do jack shit.
That's why I picked the huntsman, because I feel like I could do that. Like you got to be brave enough to shoot a wolf, but.
Bitch, you literally cry about snakes and lizards. I don't want to hear it. Yeah, don't be ladies and gents, he's shaking his tiny little finger like, no, it's true. Okay, we're going to put Michael out on Front Street here. He screams like a little boy when he sees anything. So I highly doubt he has the cojones to do that. But regardless.
So, not outside. When there's a snake inside our house. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Not outside where it's supposed to be. Anyway.
Okay. I didn't realize that's what you meant by the question. What qualifications would you need to step into that role? I thought you meant
talking about her qualifications is like the degree in folklore.
Oh shit! I totally ignored that. I was just like, what does that world need for me to join it? I thought it was the other way around. Yeah. You know? And I said nothing. The world needs nothing. I will join the world.
I'm coming.
Yes, here I am. Qualifications for me that I would need to step in that role. I guess I didn't answer the second question too, as what world would I choose? But I feel like I already have that. It's just. Is street smarts. Like I think I can figure it out. If you drop me anywhere, I'll figure it out. Either I'm just gonna be like, well, I can't figure this out and die, and there we go, I figured it out, or like try to do something else. My bad. Why didn't you stop me? I didn't realize.
Because I thought the way you answered it was interesting, actually.
No. So. He's being polite.
I'm not. Anyway, let's talk about our individual scores. Barbara, what did you give this novella?
I believe I gave this an 8 because I enjoyed the characters. I loved the humor. I know what this type of humor, A, isn't for everyone, and B, the way that the author wrote it in the book, where it's like the main character is kind of having this little asides with herself, and it kind of takes you away from the world. But I enjoy that when it's done well, and I feel like in this case it was done very well.
I gave it a 7.5. I also really enjoyed it. Thought the characters were really well done. I thought, like I mentioned earlier, I think it was like for a short story, it had everything that you needed. It was a very well encapsulated story, but also left a little bit at the end for a little cliffhanger. Let's learn some more in the next book, and I'm excited to read that too. So yeah, 7.5. I really liked it. I really recommend it. So with that, our group score for this one would be a 7.75. So make sure you're following us for free in your favorite podcast app. Give us a rating and leave us a review if they allow you to. It's really important. It helps our podcast get seen. Also, don't forget to follow us on social media. In both places, we're on Facebook and Instagram, and in both places, our handle is @BadassLitPod.
Have feedback about today's episode, you can contact us by writing to badassliteraturesociety@gmail.com. You can also send us a DM or leave a comment on Instagram or Facebook to get a hold of us.
And with that, we will see you guys later this month for our full-blown episode. Thank you so much for listening to this bonus episode. I'm Michael.
I'm Barbara. Bye.